world up. Hey, 7:05. Hey, it's 7:05. And we start as usual. This is Joe Ken for Dynamic Fitness and Strength, Dynamic Discussions. On behalf of our owners, Kurt and Tammy, and our illustrious producer, James Peters, we welcome Ali Kershner, Director of Creative Strategy for the Art of Coaching, former tremendous soccer player at a team called Duke, and a exceptional strength and conditioning coach. She doesn't know what I'm going to ask her because that's the way I like it. But we're going to touch base on all aspects of her career as an athlete, as a coach, and then her transferring into what I consider the private sector. So with that being said, let's welcome Ali to the show. Ali, thank you very much for joining us. And we know that the Art of Coaching podcast with Brett is now partnering with Dynamic Fitness and Strength. So we appreciate that. I know Craig had a lot to do with that with James. So we'll look forward to that partnership. But I'm going to start off right out the bat. And I kind of did some research. So you're from Palo Alto.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, you choose Duke for a lot of reasons, athletically and academically, I'm sure. But you're in Duke's home. You're in Stanford's hometown. You choose Duke. How much of it was getting away from Stanford, although you came back to coach there, and how much did your dad being an alum of Duke affect the decision?
Oh, you did do some research.
I don't mess around. Come on now. I have to dig deep.
You're showing your hand early.
I show it early so you know it's a strong hand the rest of the day.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good question. Well, it's twofold. It's actually probably sevenfold, but getting away was a big aspect. You know, I truly believe, and I will encourage every kid of mine and everybody that I come in contact with to leave their hometown at some point and experience other places and other cultures and other states and types of people and all of that, just because I think it's the only way to get out of your own bubble. So that was a big thing. I mean, Stanford is literally across the street from my high school.
Oh, wow.
So it would have been, it's not even like, oh, a stone's throw 10 minutes away. It's like, you know, we can see into the Stanford classrooms. But my dad actually was not really a factor at all. I mean, I grew up a Duke fan, so it was maybe subconsciously, you know, part of the list of schools that I was even interested in. But when it came down to decision time, he was like the most hands-off party there was. So I'll give him credit that it was there was no pressure, but I did decide, and I went with a good decision, I feel like, in the end, and I turned out a Blue Devil. But I know I'm talking to a Demon Deacon, so I don't want to go too crazy into the weeds.
That's why
here.
I wore my hat. That's specifically why I wore this hat. Well, it's funny you say that about getting away, because when I was getting recruited in the mid 80s, it was very different than it is now. There was no stars. There was no offer early in the 9th grade. There wasn't early signing periods and people committing and just the maneuverability of what can happen today. And 99% of the people that were affiliated with me or my family thought I was going to go to Syracuse because I'm from New York. Mm-hmm. And I visited Syracuse and thought I was in my high school. And I was like, it's not going down. And then when I visited Wake, I knew right away that this is good for me. My dad was a little upset because it was a longer drive, but he understood and it all worked out. My thing with Wake was, and I would venture I'd ask you, I don't know what other schools were recruiting you, but how much did the small enrollment factor into your decision in going into Duke, as far as just the overall class sizes and the fact that the campus isn't necessarily as, you know, like the Carolinas, the states, you know, those are some large Ohio states of the world. Did that factor into any of your decision, or was it strictly good soccer team? I'm good. I'm going to win some games and I'm going to get a good education.
It was probably education first, actually. I was definitely no star student in high school. I did enough, but when I even was on the list of consideration for a school like Duke, it was sort of a no-brainer. I was like, well, if I can use my sport to help me get into a place like this, I can't turn that down. But Certainly, yeah. I mean, the smaller class sizes, I think even like the liberal arts kind of thing would appeal to me because I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do with my life yet. And so not having to go this pre-professional route, definitely all those played a part in the decision. But once you step foot on a campus like that, the Southern charm, people were holding doors open for me. They were calling me ma'am. Was like, this is nice. I mean, the sweet tea. I really fell in love. I really did love North Carolina. And I will talk about it, I'm sure, but every state that I've lived in has been sort of a non-traditional state for a Californian to find themselves in. And I have loved each with all of my heart.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this because this is something that I believe to be true. Going to a school like Wake and talking to some of my friends that went to state schools or even junior colleges. Because I went to Wake 100% because I was a big fish in a little pond. I was by far a pretty good recruit for them. Academics were non-existent. I tell people I had a 2.43 GPA at Wake, and they told me I needed a 2.0 to graduate, so I'm an overachiever by 0.43. And I'll go to my deathbed by saying that. But what I realized early on was what makes schools like that so challenging is because of the standards that they allow people in at. And what I mean by that is you can't change American History 101 at Duke or Forsyth Technical Community College. The difference is the people are in the seats. And that's one thing that I saw, not in every class, but there was several classes where it's kind of like I play poker. And if you sit at a poker with really good poker players and you're looking around to see who the bad one is, it's you. And there was plenty of times at Wake that I walked into a class and I'm looking around and like, I'm the one who's going to have that low grade and win, and I'm not going to win on a curve. Do you believe that there's some merit in why academic schools are rated as high as they are? And it has more to do with the requirements that they set for allowing people in versus the actual subject being taught?
I mean, this could be an entire podcast or
Yeah.
webinar in itself, right? But I both, because I was sitting in classes with the most brilliant minds you've ever met, and I was also around totally normal people, and several other athletes, and we were all combined in this one classroom, and by and large, yeah, the high performers would filter themselves out, but I think at the end of the day, like, and I tell this to everybody, they're like, well, like, how do they get basketball players or football players through a school like Duke? I mean, come on, there are ways, but like, you can take sociology, you can take a communication
Oh, yeah.
major, like there are ways to self-select your experience, right? Like choose your own story, one of those
Yeah.
kind of things. You find a path that works, but you get to a point where it's like it's just kind of ridiculous when you have a perfect SAT score and you're still not getting into a school like that. That to me is where we've taken it too far.
Yeah.
And we stop looking at the merits of a student based on, the other accomplishments in their life or who they are as a person. And it's hard to account for those, right? Because they're not as quantifiable. But yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this answer other
That's
than
fine.
you
Hey,
kind
I'm
of,
a rambling fool, so
yeah,
you're
you like
fine.
you have the whole spectrum, right? Like,
Keep going, keep going. Just keep
yeah.
ticking the clock. We're good.
Here's the thing, if I could have made it through there, I think there are a lot of people that could have made it through there. It's just about being smart in your class selection at the end of the day.
Well, it's funny because when I first attended Wake, I thought I was going to be like some business economics major until I took econ and I didn't flunk it. I got a D. I can honestly say I never flunked a class in college, but so that was good because I would have had to retake it. But one thing they did was, and this hurt, like you said, you find your realms, right? Like at Wake, like Wake Forest had ROTC for our guys.
Yeah.
As freshmen, most of the kids were taking ROTC 2 semesters, 4 credits of A. I wasn't going to do that. I said, I'm not rappelling off no land, and I'm smarter than those other guys, so I'm not taking ROTC. But one thing they did do that affected several of us. The thing about Wake was it's a liberal arts school, didn't offer a liberal arts degree. So right there, it puts a crutch on some of the kids that can get into school. But they had a physical education.
Yeah.
And some kids varied to that. And that's still when physical education and teaching meant something at the high school and middle school level. But midway through my career there, they switched to health and sports science. And that's when I realized when I was in my third year, I realized this is it, man. Who am I kidding? I know what I want to do. And this is the ideal major for me to do. But what happened and again, because people don't listen, right? You try to be a mentor to these kids that are behind you. So you try, let's face it, I'm trying to teach these kids how to beat the system and graduate from Wake Forest. Mm-hmm. It's a hard deal. You're not, like you said, there's majors that you can get through, but there's no crib classes in those majors. We had a tremendous amount of social and psych majors, but when they hit perspectives, man, them dudes were in trouble. So when they dropped PE and a couple of us moved to health and sports science, we found out right away that this is legit. And then some of these kids, well, I'm going to major what you're doing, House. I said, yo, brother, you don't want to do that. This is going to cost you a whole semester of school. And I think that one thing I saw, and I want to ask you this as being on a team, it was easy for us because we lived in athletic dorms. There was no one in the dorms in the 80s but us, men's basketball, golf, and some baseball. And it was easy for us to decipher information. And it was easy for us to get the guys' registration. Here's my class schedule that my guidance counselor did. And we're like, yo, you don't want that teacher. You need to move this. How much of that goes on in what you saw at Duke with, I call it, practical mentorship of just taking these kids and trying to get them through school?
Yeah. I mean, I think my experience was, and I'm sure this changes with the culture of the team, right? But when I first got to Duke, we weren't actually all that great, just in terms of wins and losses. And so what you saw was our upperclassmen were people they had recruited who were tremendous students, and that kind of filtered down. Our team just had this awesome culture of doing well in class, and because of that, you saw certain majors in the seniors, and that trickled down to the juniors and so on. And so I think in that way there was mentorship, but the bigger thing was it was really not acceptable to not do well in school on our team. And there was even internal competitions and competitions with the lacrosse team, because God forbid we couldn't let them win. But yeah, I mean, I think it's team culture. I think it's the coaches and their precedent that they set. I think it comes from a lot of places, but yeah, we just had, I'm really lucky that it was that way, that it was cool to be smart on our team. Yeah. And because I know that's not the case everywhere you go, and certainly not every team at Duke.
All right. So you said academically high, you're trickling down these majors, evolutionary anthropology.
I knew we were going to get to this part.
Well, I just saw that and I'm like, all right, I've heard of anthropology. I had to take that as a liberal arts my first 2 years, but so give us a little taste of what that's all about.
Coach, let me tell you, during graduation, my parents show up and they did this department graduation, right, for everybody, with everybody's parents, and it was in this auditorium. And my parents show up, and the speaker is one of the professors in our department, and she goes, "Now, I bet you all wonder what you've been paying for the last 4 years." And there's a huge picture of a monkey with evolutionary anthropology on the screen, and she starts playing this video of two monkeys playing with each other, and she's like, "Pretty much this." And she's like, no, I'm just kidding. This is a really cool integrative, major. For me, it was awesome because it wasn't chem, it wasn't bio. I didn't have to compete with the real Dukies, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But I still got to kind of dabble in a lot of sciences that were a lot more applied. I got to take anatomy, I got to be in a cadaver lab, I got to take physiology. So for me, it was a cool way to take a lot of intro sciences without taking the really higher level stuff, because we didn't have a PE, we didn't have a human performance science major at all. It was that liberal artsy.
Okay, so with that being said, that kind of man, you helped me go right into the next question. So as I'm listening to you say these courses, it's got some of the physiology and the anatomy demands of it. When in your career as an athlete did strength and conditioning even become a thought of?
Well, unlike you, I was not a highly touted recruit. So I spent a lot of time in the weight room trying to get on the field. I was a goalkeeper, so there's only one of you, and
Yep.
if you're not playing, well, you're probably training. So I fell in love with the weight room really early on. I had a tremendous set of coaches, all of whom are still in the field, and actually many of whom are still at Duke, which is actually incredible this day and age.
That Olympic
And
sport jobs are real now. They'll give you some
yeah,
longevity.
it's true. I mean, even the two female mentors I had that at the time they were interns that worked with soccer. One of whom is now the women's basketball strength coach at Alabama. Another one she's a strength coach in the Army National Guard. So like I had these tremendous female mentors even from an early point. So it was the ideas had started, but to be honest with you, I always thought I was going to be in sports science because I grew up in the Silicon Valley and there's tech and all this. And I actually interned at Sparta, which is the force plate company, one summer. And they're like, we don't really know what to do with you. So you can, run some numbers in this office here. So I did, and I hated it. But at lunchtime, they would allow me to come on the floor and watch them train their pro guys. At the time, they had like a headquarters where they actually trained people. And I loved that. And so I was like, I think I might need to rethink my career trajectory because I didn't want to be in a lab the whole time. And then I interned at Duke my senior spring. So fall, it was a fall sport. So I had my senior spring to kind of just do whatever. And so I interned in the weight room and even more fell in love with like the coaching aspect of it. And, to the chagrin of my parents, all my friends are going off for these fancy finance jobs and they're going to Wall Street. And I'm like, I think I'm going to be a coach.
Yeah.
And they were very happy and proud after the fact, but I think initially they were like, okay, cool. So that was my start in the field.
So you go to Kansas. I'm going to guess based off the sports you work for, Andrea Hootie was your mentor.
Yeah, she
So
was.
not a bad place to start your career with her accolades and what she's accomplished, especially as a female and getting most of her recognition at Kansas with a male dominated sport at a super high level. I would have to think that helped not only what she knows from the X's and O's, but being a woman in a dominated male sport, to see someone of that stature dominate one of the greatest basketball programs in the history of college basketball had to be a good step for your confidence, knowing that this can be achieved if you're willing to go all in.
100%. I mean, to be honest with you, it was almost like that was all I really saw because I didn't go anywhere between Duke and Kansas. I really thought that's how all female strength coaches were treated, one, by their athletes, especially male athletes, by coaches and, at a place like that. And so, she ran an incredible program, super tight ship. Our weight room standards we were buttoned up. One of her basketball players would show up late. They'd be knocking on the weight room door because she had locked him out. She'd be like, sorry, I'll see you at practice. And the way that she treated people with so much kindness and humility, and she's just like one of the most genuine, authentic people you ever meet. But then on the other end, like, she is a firecracker and she will get after it and she loves coaching. And so, I mean, you talk about a mentor, let alone a female mentor, it doesn't get better than that. But then, I think I assumed incorrectly that that's how it was everywhere. And, you go out on your own and it's not necessarily the case. But yes, to answer your question, I was incredibly fortunate is probably an understatement in terms of where I landed for my first couple, 4 to 5 years in the field.
So one of my favorite people I've ever met, I met him in probably 1997 at a world championship qualifier weightlifting meet in Meridian, Idaho, is Andy Fry.
Oh boy.
So tell me about that unique relationship, because that I brokered a relationship with Dr. Matt Ray early in my career at Arizona State, and we've become close ever since. And those are atypical. Let's just face it. There's still that, I called it the meathead and the lab rat syndrome, where we just want our separate ways and we want to talk smack about each other, which strength coaches love to do anyway. But I found that very unique, and I talked to Andy a little bit about it. But was that you read things and you hear things, but was that dynamic what you saw? Was it real? Was there that much collaboration between the two groups?
Yeah, I think it was probably my first week on campus. I see this man walk in like a trench coat, and he walks up to, I've literally never seen the guy. He just kind of walks past me, and he walks up to a barbell, and he's like in full slacks, and he just starts cleaning. Starts cleaning the bar. And Hootie walks out, and she's talking to him, and I'm like, I'm tapping Luke, who's my office mate. I'm like, who's that? And he's like, that's Andy Fry. That's Dr. Fry. And I had heard about, the relationship between the two. But you never know, as you said, how close that relationship is. And that was the beginning of how, like, understanding the dynamic that they had. And certainly it wasn't like our weight room was constantly, a laboratory,
right?
But we had very specific initiatives where we were running, whatever protocol on our basketball guys, I was fortunate enough to benefit from that myself. I did my master's thesis on our baseball team using force plates in the lab across the street. And Andy was my mentor. And it brought both credibility and a feeling of purpose to our job. Is like, we're not just obviously helping the athletes, but we're working to help the field as well, in terms of putting out research that's actionable and on a very specific elite population of person, and not just your untrained, 25 to 40-year-old man.
Well, that's one thing. Like when I first met Matt Ray, and I was just blasting him because I was arrogant in the mid, and I was like, I'm the research. I don't read any research. I'm doing research every single day. And when we first met Matt, and we were going over some programming and stuff, and we had been doing a lot of the conjugated stuff that I've learned through studying Louis Simmons. And that's when a bunch of the researchers were coming out with undulated periodization articles, and just happened that I saw one from Arizona State. So we invite Matt in, and we're talking about our programming, typical. You can't do that. There's no way you're doing this. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, my man, we're training the football team at 4:00 today. Come back and I'll show you what's going on. So he comes back. He came back, which impressed me anyway. And after he watches the workout, he goes, "You're 10 years ahead of the research." And I said, and that's why I don't read the research. And I have a big issue with researchers or sports scientists who don't give enough credit to the anecdotal research that's happening every day, because we just don't have time to data plot, and we don't have the staff that can critically write what we're doing. And I always go, when they say, well, it's not evidence-based, my evidence-based is every kid who's told me thanks. That's all the evidence I need. Going back to Hootie, I have a deep respect for her, because I did a Gatorade roundtable with her last January, and we were going through stuff, and I might even have it in this book somewhere at the beginning of my notes, but so I don't know if I asked her or someone asked her about her achieving her MBA. And I'm not gonna get it right, but the answer was she wanted to learn about business and how business operates, because she wanted to figure out how these athletic departments spend their money. Were you there during that time she was doing that? And
Yeah,
I
I
can
think
only
that
imagine some of the conversations you had about how they're spending the money at Kansas.
well, I think not just that, but I literally remember being in the room and helping her study for one of her finance tests. And we were looking at these documents and we're like, I don't have anything here. But she was like, turn it upside down. We're like, is this right? And you just get a bunch of strength coaches together and you're taking a, multi linear regressions and trying to figure out which way is north and south. But it was yeah, it was really cool to see her do that. Here's what's incredible at Hootie. If she sees a problem, she finds a solution. And it's outside the box most often. And I think that's where a lot of coaches are afraid to go. But like you said, she had an interest in figuring out how the department was spending money so that we could figure out how we could get more staff. I mean, that was always our thing is we need more human capital because our staff is the best in the country. That's what we thought. And as long as we can get good people here and keep them here, we will continue to have a successful program. I mean, obviously we wanted more money for equipment and we wanted more money for tech and all that, but it was okay, that's the problem to be solved. How can we work backwards? And, not only did it bring her credibility, it brought her a seat at the table a lot of times, but it also, I think, got her to look at the problem differently than she probably would have otherwise, just by talking to other coaches who had dealt with similar things. Because, as you know, if the problem hasn't been solved yet, you got to go outside the well and find something else and inject it back in order to find new solutions. So, um, she was probably, one of the early inspirations I had for just kind of more lateral thinking in terms of problem solving. Like I have a tremendous interest in like philosophy and art and like, engineering and my both my parents are entrepreneurs and just talking to them and hearing how they've solved problems in their industry and how can we use that in our field, to kind of um, work through some of the things that we've all dealt with as coaches has been really cool. But yeah, man, Hootie is she's
She's back
she's
where she
got everything.
started now.
She's a weapon.
Yeah, she's right back. Generally, when you go full circle, that's probably where you're dropping down into the retirement package.
You never with her. Here's the thing, you see a move, right? And with Hootie, it's always like three more layers deep. Like she's already like planned, you know, 10 years down the line and she's got
Yeah.
like seven things in the works that you just have no idea. So like I heard about UConn and I'm like, oh boy, I can't wait to hear what's coming next. This is going to be the Hootie Center for developments coming up and it's going to be
Well,
yeah,
that's yeah, because
city of
I was
stores is going to
checking
be
on
named
her.
after her.
I was checking on her when the Texas deal kind of went bad, and she kind of was. I can't announce, but I do have a spot. And then when it was that spot, I was like, wow, I wasn't think that was not on my radar at all.
Well,
All
isn't
right,
that one of the laws of power is always keep people on their toes?
yeah. Well, she definitely kept me on my toes on now because I love trying to get me some scoop. I'm
I
I
can tell.
I had one of the best job boards in the history of college when
I
I
think
was
I think
coming
I
up.
read it a few times.
So, all right, you now go to now you're back at Stanford. Did you move in with your mom and dad?
Man, you're gonna out me on this on
No,
this. Yeah.
you know what, I was just sitting down, I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, well, she's from Palo Alto. Did you save some money and move with mom and
Yeah,
dad?
yeah. So I was incredibly fortunate that and it's funny, I'll tell you, when I was interviewing at Stanford, they have such an issue with retaining people because
Yeah.
of the cost of living that they ask you on your interview, have you looked at housing prices? And if not, please do before you take the next step with us. And so, when I said, hey, my parents still live there, the sticker shock is nothing new to me. I think they're like, okay, phew.
Yeah.
But yeah, I moved in with my parents for that first,
I would have moved
uh,
in the whole time I was there.
yeah, well,
I had my son, his wife, and two grandkids living with me to help them. So I'm cool with extended family.
I loved it. I'll never talk bad about being able to stay with my parents.
Yeah.
It was nobody gets to do that anymore when they're in their 20s, right? So
No.
it was pretty cool.
All right. So you're there. So a lot of people don't know. Well, unless you follow me enough. So you go to Stanford, and in this day and age of UConn, Gino Auriemma, and then if you trace it back even 10 years, it was always UConn, Tennessee, UConn, Tennessee. But what people don't know, two things. One, I did women's basketball for 6 years at Boise State. The woman I worked for first was Tara's first assistant, June Doherty, when she left to take the Boise State job. So I know what 90s basketball, women's basketball is all about. And it was about the Stanford Cardinal. They were killing it back in those days. Two of our assistants, Trish Stevens and then Jill. I don't know Jill's maiden name. She married Trish's brother, but those were two of the all-time best players in the 90s at Stanford. And they were on our staff. And then June played at Ohio State. Her husband Mike was on the staff. He played at Ohio State. But when I first took over, obviously they were skeptical. And June Doherty's the reason why the tier system was actually got created, because of her challenge. But she brought with her the Stanford Cardinal women's basketball running test.
The Warrior Test?
I don't know what it's called. All I know is it's 16 200 meters, run 8, get a 2-minute rest, and run 8 more. Is that still the running test at Stanford?
Well, it takes a different form these days, but it sounds like it's probably about the same amount of volume.
I'll never forget. I hated it for those. I hated it for those girls, man. And we had two. We had Lydia Barbanova and Tori Torilova. I don't know how they defected. I don't know how June got them there. I mean, they would sneak out to the bathroom and smoke cigarettes during the workouts. I know, because Tori always came back smelling like smoke. But I couldn't believe, we did stupid running tests even back then. I mean, I ran a 12-minute run, a half-mile run, 1640s, and 16. But when she dropped the 16 200s, I was like, oh my God. So if it's evolved, tell me what they're doing now, if you're allowed to.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, I'm still in Palo Alto, so probably her ears can hear me.
She's got a wide reach in Palo Alto.
Yeah. She's definitely she's got a lot of clout in this city for sure, which deservedly so. I mean, she's an incredible coach, but it's currently, it's called the Warrior Test, and it's the length of a court 5 times. So out and back 5 times,
Okay.
and then 5 reps of that.
All right. So I just saw somebody, you know what? I think Alan Bishop at Houston is doing that, pushing a sled as like his warm up for a weight room workout. I just saw that. All right. So you go 5 times down and back. What's the goal time?
You have to make it under 60 seconds.
Ooh. And then what's the rest time between each round?
It's 2 to 1 work to rest.
That's not bad.
Or sorry, 1 to 2 work to rest.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So, here I am, tough guy, right? I'm like, brand new strength coach, trying to impress staff, trying to impress the players. I have Hootie as a mentor. She's like, you better never let any of your athletes beat you in conditioning or in a lift. And, I consider myself a fit person. So I get there and she's telling me about this test, and I just see the looks on the girls' faces when I say, we're still going to be doing the Warrior Test, even though you got a new strength coach. Tara wants it. And so they're looking at me, and I was like, fuck it. I'm running it with you. Let's go. and all summer, literally, I woke up and I trained it with them, and I did every single repetition, and it killed me. Damn near killed me. Because I was a goalkeeper. I mean, can we go back to that?
Yeah.
But talk about buy-in. I know that that's not realistic for every coach in every situation, but I think there's just something to be said for them seeing you in the trenches, a little
Yeah,
bit
for sure.
vulnerable, struggling, and doing something that you also probably don't want to be doing, but are doing because it's for the betterment of the team and the culture.
Yeah, that's one thing. Like my son's just starting his career out, and I don't think enough, especially in the Olympic arena. There's those kids, you showing some vulnerability and you showing them any ounce of anything that you want to be more about what they're about outside the weight room. It's instant. And I just wrote a blog about this, one of the ones I submitted for James, but is not enough mentors because people don't mentor anyway. I'm not getting it. That's a whole different. I'm not going there. But not enough people tell the strength coach to go to practice. Just showing up on their turf.
Yeah.
Not just waiting up. And I know it's hard if you got 4 or 5 teams. I understand that. But back in the day when me and Craig started, we had 17 teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I still went to practice. And I went to every event that was out there for every sport. And that helps. One, it helps your credibility with the players. And Peter found that out right away. And like you, that fool started wrestling with the wrestling team at Army. And now he can't wrestle practice because he thinks he tore his shoulder up. Well, what do you think is going to happen? You're a thrower in college. You're a thrower in high school. The last time you did any contact sports was 8th grade or 7th grade football. Man, these dudes are going to bounce you around.
Yeah.
Even the coaches are wrestling with him. But like you said, he ran the ski slope with him, 2.5 mile slope. And wrestling is a hard sport to crack because it's such a unique click sport. Mm-hmm. Like wrestlers, you're looking around. You're looking around. And now when I first was at Boise State with wrestling, female wrestling just started. And we had a woman who was a post-grad who was in there wrestling with our team. And, you walk into a wrestling meet, those people know wrestling. There's no one in a wrestling that shows up in the audience of a wrestling meet that doesn't know what's going on, what that move was, and how many points it was. But what you saying that, I would only imagine right off the bat. And I'll tell you something that I did. Again, I'm not running the conditioning test. And I train hard and I want my guys to know I train, but I have to coach. I got to coach those guys. So I don't try to get in.
Yeah, for sure.
With them. But the one thing with some of that stuff is just showing them the capabilities. Like for me, my way to show them that I was on the same place with them is by punishment stuff. Now it's hard to talk about that. You could get fired. But if they were late, they had to do up downs every 30 seconds for the length of the workout. And I told them, if I'm late, I do the same. And if I screw up, you guys set what you want. And it happened to me, more than once, but I'd say not more than 3 or 4 times, but more than once. But like I was at Arizona State, it was the day of our one of our spring practices. We're having our coaches clinic. I got a bunch of coaches in the weight room. I look down, I'm late. I run out. My assistant's already got it going. Probably could have slipped in there, but a couple of the seniors were smiling, and I'm like, they got me. And the next day in the weight room, I'm in the punishment corner, and every 30 seconds, here's this 330-pound old man doing up downs every 30 seconds, and it wasn't a pretty up down. I've run 16 110s in the snow at Louisville because I told them I'd shovel the field, and when we got there wasn't a shovel in the entire building. So that stuff like that, I mean, that just shows you that one, you're willing to say what you are and do what you do. And to me, like Craig said, why would you do that? I said, because that's what I am. Stupid like that. If I'm gonna say I'm gonna do it, I'm not gonna say, oh, I was just kidding. Then you got no chance with that. Now you were successful as an athlete. I think it was 3 Elite Eights, were 4-time academic all ACC.
Yeah, I got the academic award, not the playing award.
That's all right.
It still counts.
Hey, I made the dean's list twice, and if you heard the classes I took to make those dean's lists, You think I
No
should have got
matter, no
revoked. That's
matter.
right.
You can graduate magna cum
I
laude,
know.
but not take any hard classes. So it
I
doesn't
know. I
matter.
got a 4.0 at Wake. Had 2 pass fail classes. That's the way it goes. But damn, that's see, I'm old now. I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, talking about then you go to Kansas and you see that tremendous success that Hootie has with basketball. Well, now you go to Stanford, you're coaching one of the to me, like I said, one of the most historic women's basketball programs and just a historic basketball program regardless of men and women. If you really look at what's been accomplished, you can just take the male or female away from it and say that what she's accomplished there is up there with the greats. But long dry spell, like long dry spell. And she finally, didn't she, while you were there, also like win over didn't she set the record or win over 1,000 games, or she did some accomplishment, right? That she got most wins or something crazy. I saw them put the
you're talking
t-shirts
about
on
Tara.
during COVID.
You're talking about Tara. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She hit 1,000 wins. We all got T-shirts that had a big goat on the front and it said Tara on the top or Tara at the top or something. Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
So now she gets to the pinnacle again. How do you? And again, I did the one thing you never want to do as a football guy is lose a Super Bowl. It's the worst thing you can do in all of sports, and especially in football, is lose football, Super Bowl, because you might not get back, and we didn't. So I have the one ring in my ring case that you're not supposed to wear. I wear it anyway because we were 15-1 and we went to the Super Bowl. But here you are. Tell what type of and I think one year you guys made it all the way to the what do they call a soccer cup, like a world. The final cup or something?
Yeah, the college cup. Yeah, my freshman year, we were in the national championship game and we lost to Stanford.
Yeah, so you know exactly how that feels. It doesn't feel good. Yeah. But now you're as a strength and conditioning coach, and for the most part, you're the head strength and conditioning coach for the women's basketball team. You're at the pinnacle of sport. You've won the championship. What is the exhilaration of being on the winning side of that, and how does it? Like how does that even resonate when you're seeing when you know how much work and how much warrior tests have been put in, and even for coach, man, I mean, you can't tell me that if I know what I think I know as her as a competitor, you can't tell me she wasn't heated how many times Gino's winning all those championships and she needs to get her one before it's all said and done. So what is that even like at the court when the buzzer sounds?
Yeah, it's, like you said, I've been kind of stupid lucky in having been in these programs with a lot of success and maybe even being at the right place at the right time. And I certainly don't take credit for, the establishment of success that a place like Stanford has had, right? Like I came in and it's almost a matter of not messing up the athletes and not hurting them as opposed to really building them up. I mean, I was truly so fortunate to work with first athletes that like really loved training, which is like the like hard to find sometimes. And two, just like a culture where, again, like my Duke soccer team culture where like it's cool to work hard. And again, that's not a thing everywhere. So, all the credit belongs there, but I want to say that the feeling was like jubilation and happiness, but to be honest with you, this past year it was relief because of the COVID just like roller coaster that we had been through. I mean, it started in December. We were told that we could no longer play basketball indoors. Our county literally shut us out. We were on the tennis courts and then we moved to Vegas and we literally lived in Vegas for a month. And teams would fly in and play us. And so it started with that. And then we played every game on the road until mid-January. And then after that, it was, the 3-week bubble in San Antonio, which, by the way, being back at that same stupid hotel gave me the worst PTSD I've ever had. It was like constantly just like, oh, like, did somebody test positive? And, getting our nose swabbed 9 times every week, which it
Oh,
was excessive, right? Like we were obviously the most strict and the most careful of any team probably in the history of COVID teams, so it was just like there was all this angst and stress. And I can't imagine being on staff and like having to deal with that part of it. Like I was just reacting at a certain point, like, okay, who do we got today? What
yeah.
are we doing today? Right. And I think by the time we got there and everybody was healthy and we were able to play that game, and then we like ended up victorious somehow. I think we were all just like, holy shit. Did that just happen? Like it was like such this like rush of like relief and thankfully we made it to this far, and then also the happiness and stuff that comes with winning a national championship. But yeah, you just kind of sit there and you're like, whew.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up about the COVID because I almost forget about it. Not on, and I don't mean that to stir the pot. It was a monster thing in social media. I thought it was despicable, and I'm not a fan of the NCAA anyway. But how well, you're in that bubble for the tournament, and now all of a sudden these social media posts of the weight room area at the men's versus the weight room area offered to the women. How like people like Coach Vanderveer, Gino Auriemma, was it? I don't the Baylor coach who just left to go to LSU. You can't tell me they weren't heated or they weren't trying to get to the bottom of this, even though it was hard to change. And I know some people stepped up and helped change the narrative as fast as they could. But I, I mean, was that being talked about, or was that being held? Was that being talked about like out loud in the all lobby team, or was that being more some of these big time people and administrators behind closed doors saying this isn't right?
Yeah, definitely the latter. I think, initially it was the strength coaches that brought, the made us think about it. It was my colleagues and myself and, everybody was there. It was like, whoa, 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 this isn't right. And there were a lot of things that weren't right. It wasn't just the weight room, it was the food, it was the accommodations, it was the lack of being allowed outside, it was the testing. I mean, you've heard the story, but once the strength coaches said something about it and it became very obvious, and then the news picked it up and
Yeah,
obviously then became a big deal then. And credit to the coaches, the entire time my head coach had my back. I know, Don Staley and a couple of the other
yeah,
big names, Gino, they were great about publicly supporting the push that we had made for a better weight room. But they were also talking about like, hey, like there's some other stuff that needs to be solved here. But those were meetings that were happening directly with the NCAA, and it was handled mostly behind closed doors. It we'll leave it there.
yeah.
But
I'm like, I understand. Yeah, I just wanted to know because, and again, a couple of people stepped to the plate equipment wise, and it got moved very quick. And that only happens if the right people got in the face of the right people, and it happened fast. So, whatever y'all did as a group of strength and conditioning coaches to get to your coaches and them supporting you, kudos to y'all because that it got flipped as fast as it could with the best situation possible.
yeah, I agree with you. Like looking back on it, I'm like, damn, we just got a weight room in 36 hours. That's pretty cool.
I know, amazing. So we had a couple of questions usually we get come in, and this, uh, and then we'll kind of. I got one more talk about your transition, and then we're closing in on the hour. So Charles Isaac asked you two questions. One is, what does your off-season and in-season periodization model look like? And then the second, how do you achieve overall buy-in from your athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on the periodization quickly. Well, not, I'll give it what it's due. Off season, and honestly, I think, Joe, I think this comes back to a lot of stuff that you really appreciate. with like your block zero stuff, but every off season is back to square one, back to foundations. And then for me, it's always a matter of starting with the end in mind. Early in my career, I think I was tempted to be like, well, that program worked because that team was pretty successful. So let's just do it again. But I think it was, a matter of every year we have a different team, we have different needs, we have different profiles of athletes. So like, let's take a look. And, if you start with the end in mind, for us and for me, that with our basketball team, for example, was getting them to be able to handle the load and volume of practice, because our practices were 3 hours long. And that was obviously way longer than a game. And so I knew that if they
way
could
longer than the rules.
it was right after rules. Believe me. But if they can handle 3 hour practice, they can certainly handle a game. And with that is then just a smart progression, primarily linear if it's in the off season, of building, volume. Our basketball players they were not muscle bound by any means. So for me, I did spend a longer time in a hypertrophy phase, just because we had these little string beans and I wanted to make sure that, we were actually putting on enough muscle to get something out of the strength and power work that we would do later. And then just a progression to strength, power, and speed with, obviously it was linear in that sense, but because they are still having to perform basketball activities throughout the off season, I would touch on, the whole range of speeds every week. It's just in a different ratio. So that, that was big, like I might have 2 volume days, more of a strength day, and then a speed day early in the off season. And that would transition to, a volume day, 2 strength days and a speed day, to, whatever it might be as we get closer and closer to season. But I always want to keep touching on the qualities that are important, because as we know, you can lose them pretty quickly. But when I think about the off season, these kids spend so much time on a basketball court that the bigger goal for me was to get them off the basketball court. So whether that was like going it outside and running on the grass, whether that was, we would even just like go play in the sand, just a little bit, not because I think that makes you faster or anything, but because just changing up the surfaces. And then competition, like having them have some fun and like, introduce a lot of variety and play was big, because especially at Stanford, so much of what they do is controlled, and they like even the practices are so similar every day that there's not a whole lot of room for choice and decision making and failure. And so I try to introduce that, so that they were getting doses of having to fail and learn and grow within the weight room, even when they weren't necessarily getting that on the court. So that's definitely off season. In season, man, it's hard to even nail down one particular, periodization or philosophy. Changed so many times. Like COVID, I think you have to throw out the window, because that was just not ideal. We would have a lift canceled. We would have lifts shortened to 20 minutes just because somebody tested positive, and then we had to, so that's a different story. But I think in season, it's a lot more nonlinear. It's, touching on things that, like I said before, it's making sure that they're staying strong, working through good movement, because they lose a lot of that in season when they're I mean, the plyometric load in basketball is ridiculous. It's stupid. So it's how can we do maybe longer, slower movements, bigger ranges of motion that they're not getting from the repetitions that they're overdoing on the court. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but hopefully that gives people a little bit of behind the scenes into the brain.
So let me piggyback on that before you hit the other one with the in season. And a couple of things you said about the off season with all the practice. So at Utah, I worked with Rick Majerus in men's basketball, who is probably one of the smartest basketball coaches that ever walked the face of the earth, and very meticulous. I mean, in 2 years of watching basketball practice, there's no doubt in my mind I could have coached high school basketball and won a lot of games. But with that being said, like you said, he maximized the time. Was there ever a time you felt, and I was always pretty aware of what was going on, but there was times when our guys were asked to lift after practice that I just sent them home. I didn't tell the coaches I did it. I just said, go home. I'll take care of it. Y'all lifted. Did you ever get into that? And when I learned later in the NFL, veterans get vet days. So I started saying sometimes I gave vet lifting days. I see a guy come in and he just look worn out. And I said, go get treatment, get some extra recovery. We'll figure it out tomorrow. How much of that behind the scenes did you take in yourself as a former athlete? Like, they don't have it. What are we doing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, that influenced what I came to the coaches with in the beginning. And I pushed hard for lifting before practice, because I knew that if I had them first, one, I could, microdose the crap out of whatever I wanted to do. Because the way that I kind of finally convinced the coaches to approach it was shorter sessions before practice. Hey, listen, they're going to get warmed up.
Yeah.
They're going to get some activation. They're going to roll right into practice feeling good. You don't have to waste your time warming them up. So once I was able to convince them of that, the issues you're talking about went way down. But absolutely, I mean, that to me is the art of coaching. It's the recognition that there's marginal gains to be had at that point. What's the risk versus reward of a kid that's coming in just like dead tired and overworked from practice. At that point, are you just trying to prove a point, or what's the deal? So I think for sure, it was situational, right? It's contextual. Is that what the group needs at that time? But yeah, I was not above giving them a vet day here or there.
I mean, so in your case, strength and conditioning involved, I'm going to guess you traveled with the team.
Yeah.
To all the games.
Yeah.
And again, basketball, to me, basketball is one of the hardest teams to program for because it's a 2-semester sport. It's extremely long season. Then you've got, if you're at a school like yours, you can already count you're going to the tournament. So you got championship season to add on. There's more weeks to the competitive stage. How many times during that, and again, I'm not sure if you guys played Thursday, Saturday, or Friday, Sunday, or how they split your games. How many times during that traveling and stuff, was there ever a time where you didn't have enough time to get work in and you would do, like you said, a microdose before practice on the court because you're away from school?
Yeah. Actually, and during that COVID time, we didn't have a weight room. So I was a traveling weight room. I have so many stories I could share, but yes, the answer is, sometimes it was even as simple as, we're doing some hop, skips, and bounds. We're doing some depth drops off bleachers.
Yeah.
We're breaking out the mini bands. We're partner resisted stuff. Absolutely. I mean, the weight room is wherever you make it be. And I think a great coach recognizes what's ideal and then what's practical and what is required of the situation and the time you're in. And I'm not one to pout if I can't get in the weight room. What's the next thing up, right? Like, what's the solution? And I actually really enjoy times where, because she was famous for being like, hey, we're not going to have time to lift today. We were on the road. And then all of a sudden, end of practice, she'd be like, hey, Coach Ali, you got them for a quick lift? And I'm like, yep. Like, you're like, okay. And like the girls are like laughing because they know, like, I mean, I think that's kind of fun. And I think as long as we say at Art of Coaching, chaos equals clarity. And when there's more chaos and more noise, it forces you to really hone in on what's important. And I think that was a great lesson in that skill.
That's what I said, man. The strength coach is the chameleon, man. You got to be able to adapt, and like in any job, but you got to learn how to hit the curveball too, because there ain't no fastballs in strength and conditioning, no matter what sport you're in.
No.
So to give you that second question again, how do you achieve overall buy-in from your athletes?
So I think when I was coming up in the field, I didn't really have a definition I went with. I just sort of tried to be relatable. And I'll tell you, one thing I really struggled with early on is, as you can see, I look young. I look like many of the athletes that I worked with. And at one point, I was younger than them, as I'm sure every coach can say at one time when they're a GA or an intern or something. I really struggled to draw the line between coach, who I was told, like be vulnerable, share things about yourself. You're hearing all that stuff, but also be professional. Don't cross the line. Obviously, you don't want to be their friend.
Yeah.
And so I always stayed on the over secret, not secretive, but protective side of being a professional. And I think initially that kind of hurt me because I tried to be somebody that I wasn't. And, I'm very outgoing. I love talking to people. I love being around people. And when I tried to kind of shut that part off, to be more professional, I think that ended up hurting me early on. But, as I met, especially Brett, who, talks about buy-in a lot, I didn't realize that there was an actual definition of it, in that it's trust plus commitment. And those are the things that we've been talking about this whole time is, I think if you can build trust, which I think is like a bank account, you make deposits and you make withdrawals. And as long as you have enough deposits in there, once in a while, if you have to make a withdrawal, it's okay. But it's one of those things that's built in the micro interactions before a session. It's built in asking how their dad's doing if he's in the hospital. It's asking what their interests are. It's having a meal with them on the road. That's where trust for me is built. And then the commitment is the stuff that we talked about. It's, you set a standard and you hold yourself to it. You're willing to jump into something, even if it sucks. But I think when it comes down to it, it's just being a real person and like being the coach that you would have needed or wanted, is how I ended up approaching buy-in and still do. I mean, I think it's just being a good human.
I hear you. All right. So here's how we'll end it. I do some research, study up. You play for an exceptional team. You're part of a very successful college program at Duke. You move into your coaching career. You go right, like you said, you get into a tremendous opportunity at Kansas. You bounce to Stanford. You're on the come up. You're growing your reputation as a leader in our field, regardless if it's male or female. You tie in the national championship, which always gives you street cred. We all know it's recruiting and all of that. But then now where I see and again, everybody's younger to me. So I see this younger coach that's ready to make the move to to catastrophic success. And now you transition out of the coaching, different types but you transfer out of the university and the team setting and transfer into the private sector. To me, and again, it's not who am I to judge? I'm not judging, but at a time where it doesn't make no sense to me. Like, so when you're going through that process, when you've been pretty much now, let's just say you played club soccer, you went to, you're teamed out. It's all you've done. And I know there's, people are going to say, well, it's a different team, but talk about you're competing for wins and losses. That's a competitor. You didn't sign up for participation. You signed up for a reason because you're willing to do what it needs to be a winner. And even though losing sucks, you understand that that's part of the choices I've made by going this route. So what came across in your evolution during this time that you felt like your value now to I don't like to call coaching a profession because there's very little profession about it. It's a very nice field. It's a terrific career for a lot of people. But what was the thought process of transitioning out of the team setting and more into the private setting of coaching?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I've been asked many, many times, sometimes with some concern, making sure I'm still okay. But I think what it comes down to is two things. First and foremost, if I look back even to the beginning of my career as a coach in strength and conditioning, what I loved was that time on the floor, interacting with the student athletes, solving problems, figuring out how to deal with tough athletes, how to get people to do things that they didn't necessarily like to do, how to build buy-in, how to build trust. And that continued. And to be honest with you, I kind of maybe told myself, I'll grow into a love of programming, and I'll grow into a love of the minutia of performance on a very technical level. And it never came, and I think that's okay. I did it, and I was good at it, and I read all the stuff that you're supposed to read. But man, I really found myself nerding out on power dynamics and relationships and communication skills and all that stuff. And when it came down to it, I was like, at a certain point, I think you kind of realize, well, I could stay in this forever. Like I've made it to the top, and I could literally stay here forever if I wanted to. I have a coach.
Living at home.
Yeah, living at home. I have a coach. I have a coach who will never get fired, right?
Yeah.
And so I really, as long as I did my job well, could stay here. And I just wanted to figure out, this is what I'm passionate about. Can I take that and pursue that specifically? And for me, that was really a moment of clarity in terms of this feels more in line with my skill set and where I want to grow. And so if I can do that and have an opportunity to really build something and give back to a community, help a community that really raised me and that I love so much, and build skill sets along the way that I think will be valuable to me for the rest of my life, marketing and sales and speaking and things like that, I was touching on less in my job with the team. And I think it was quality of life. It was a lot of different things, but ultimately it came down to finding a home and a colleague, and somebody like Brett, who was going to really push me, and I knew would help evolve our field in a way that fit my passion and my skill set, in a way that I knew long-term strength and conditioning might not.
Well, that answers my question, because I'm like, golly, man, she's fairly young to be bailing out, but it makes sense. And like anything else, like you said, if one thing that I tell people all the time is it's an interesting dynamic to be in it, as long as I haven't seen all the good and all the bad. But and again, that's the one thing that's changed in the private sector. Like when I came up, if someone sent a resume and they were in the private sector, they were a personal trainer. There's no way you're hiring that person. But because it's like everybody else, like Boyd Epley is the godfather of strength and conditioning, but he wasn't the first strength and conditioning coach. And I put Mark Verstegen in the same framework as Boyd when it comes to private sector coaching, because that's not personal training. That's performance coaching, and it's just in a different environment. And there was a lot of people before Mark, the Lawrence Seagraves, the Mike Boyles, the Chip Smiths of the world. But Mark's vision, like Boyd's vision, was very broad, very worldly, to say the least, global, whatever you want to say. And those two individuals created what I'm in today and what you were in, or what we were in. And then the other created a whole different phenomenon that opened the door to a lot of coaches who may not want to be involved in the team setting, because it's different. The coaching's different. The way you can coach is different. And you're not worried about a bunch of kids controlling your livelihood on wins and losses, and coaches that you have to work with that you may not believe in their culture or their schematics, but it's just the way it is. So I think that because of that, you're seeing things that what you guys are working on now, branching out and evolving, that is hopefully going to benefit the individual. Again, politics and all the stuff that go on with strength and conditioning. And I've said it out loud. No one knows what we do. No one really knows how we do it. And GMs, coaches, administrators, owners don't know where to put us in the hierarchy of what the flow chart looks like. And as much as people want to tell me it's going to change, I'm going to tell you after 33 years, it's not changed.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
they still don't know who we are. So I can see why a person like yourself, who's got you could tell you got a global peripheral vision of what's going on, you'll probably serve yourself with more value to you moving forward than to get caught in, like you called it, the minutia of what most of us love to do.
Well, and I think it's interesting. You hit on a brilliant point, which is that, how do coaches provide value and how do they tend to prove their value is more certs, going to conferences, fancy tech, things like that, which are great. Like, I'm not saying anything against those, but like, to your point, the greater world, the people are hiring us, the people that are, deciding our paychecks, still by and large don't understand or perceive that as true value. And so, I think part of my passion in this is, how do we get coaches to be able to communicate that value to the people that need to hear it, to themselves, to other coaches, to bring up the level of professionalism in the field so that people are taken seriously. And this can be a field that people can feel proud about staying in, retiring in, and being sustained in for a long time. And I think, those are the questions that I want to help coaches answer, because guess what? The word coach predates sport by like 200 years.
Oh,
it
easy.
started in Hungary. It was like the name of a city where, they made horse-drawn carriages
to transport people.
Yeah. So it's like, can we redefine that term to mean something? Well, we know it to mean, but the rest of the world doesn't always understand.
Craig, you got anything before we wrap it up?
No, I think that I love everything you guys are talking about, and talking about a coach. And Joe, you mentioned it before. I like the word mentor. I wish that more people mentored the younger coaches coming up in this profession.
Hold your Turk on that profession word. Well, Ali, you killed it, and we appreciate you jumping on. I know we were trying to do it last week, but last week was it wasn't going to work. And
yeah, it was pretty crazy.
It's much better the way it was. We were all traveling and plane flights, and as you were, you got to speak over there and stuff. But we appreciate you coming on. For all those who will be listening, we do put this on YouTube. James will have this up probably in the next 2 days for everybody who signed up online. Again, for Kurt and Tammy, our owners, for James, for Craig and his staff who are killing it, and for Ali Kershner, Art of Coaching. Hold on, I got the title. Wait a second. Director of Creative Strategy. Did you create that?
I made that up. I made that up.
That's what I'm talking about. Make up your own titles. I'm the king of that. Hold on. James said something. What did he say here? All right, that's it.
Yeah, thanks,
he
guys.
Says thanks. Hey, we'll see you all down the road. Next month, me and James will figure it out, and we'll let you know what we're doing. Till then, thank you very much. And for the dynamic team, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Ali.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Guys. Yep, bye.